The pushback to Donald Trump's power grabs is hitting both him, his administration, and these other Republicans who, according to voters in their own districts, often red-leaning districts, say enough is enough. Lisa Cook is the Fed governor that Trump posted on social media he is firing, which is a classic example in Trump's increasingly autocratic efforts to see what he can get away with. A, that's not a legal way to typically fire someone, but B, and more importantly, the Fed officials are not part of a Trump cabinet or people who he picks that way. He does nominate them, they're Senate confirmed, but then unlike, say, the cabinet, we know since the beginning of the Fed, no president has ever removed a Fed official for no reason. And Ms. Cook is punching back today, filing a lawsuit against Trump over this unprecedented and illegal removal, as her lawyers put it. And this could be a landmark legal battle because the Federal Reserve is not just some other little part of the government as far as Trump or Musk is concerned, as they've tested going after parts of the government that, whether it's good policy or not, judges said, yep, well, you can fire certain employees. This is different. The Federal Reserve was always insulated from exactly this kind of partisan pressure to protect its independence in the American economy. And even if it sounds like a kind of obtuse thing and you don't wake up thinking about the Federal Reserve every day, most people don't, that's a good thing because most days in most parties' administrations, there haven't been these kind of efforts to turn it partisan. That is a backdrop for the increasing concern and pushback around the country. California Governor Gavin Newsom has become one of the loudest Democratic voices in saying you can't just wait around and criticize. You have to fight fire with fire. And he is talking directly about something that used to be considered sort of a more fringe concern, or is it really going to happen? Well, he says it's happened here and Trump wants it to happen again, how he will cling to power.
He will send the National Guard. He will send them all across this country, and he will do so through Election Day. And he'll do so working in concert, as he has with ICE and Border Patrol, to do the same. You have the largest private police force in the world. People actually think this guy's serious about having another election? You think he's joking about 2028? Wake up. You will lose your country.
A stark warning from a governor who has used his powers, both going to court and fighting with Trump, and also said he's going to continue to break decorum or anything else he has to in recounting, for example, what are typically private discussions in the White House between him and the president, who he said was very exercised about continuing to abuse power. Now, for all the talk about, well, Trump did win the election and all the reasons that Democrats may have lost by 1.5 points, this is an ongoing story, not just one snap review of where the country was in November. And the Democrats made their mistakes. I think that's been well established under the Biden era, and they had to swap out the candidate. But even after losing by 1.5 points, the country, the nation is watching this. And I want to remind you, with everything that Trump has done in this first year, where he stands. An approval rating that is now the lowest of his second term, one of the lowest of modern presidencies, sinking in this late August period of Trump clashes to just 37%. There's also a public health crisis unfolding and turmoil at the CDC, where the Trump administration, not through Trump directly initially, but through basically an intermediary, said they were going to oust their chosen CDC director because of a clash with RFK over vaccines. Now, she, like the board governor, is saying there are still rules and laws here, even if Trump wished otherwise. And because this was done through an unusual intermediary, she argues and states that is just not lawful. She does serve at the pleasure of the president, different than the Fed, but she says she's not going anywhere until the president steps in and says what he means. 4 other top officials are resigning in what looks like a very clear protest of how the Trump administration has dealt with both the science of this and the process. Now, one of the doctors wrote a letter on the way out accusing Trump officials of pushing policies and materials that do not reflect scientific reality and are designed to hurt rather than improve the public's health. Also stating that RFK Jr. has been intentionally eroding the trust in those, what she calls, quote, low-risk vaccines, and noting Trump officials' desire to please a political base will result in death and disability of vulnerable children and adults. CDC workers also held a rally outside the headquarters, along with some allies, in defense of what they view as a kind of rolling attack on both the science and the leadership of that organization. Now, RFK clearly has a blank check from Trump. So what he does is not just an RFK problem. The buck stops with the president. And as we showed you, voters seem to realize that, turning against this administration in this early period. He's also saying he's found interventions that he says may cause autism.
We'll have announcements as promised in September. We're finding certain interventions now that are clearly, almost certainly causing autism. And we're going to be able to address those in September.
RFK using that televised meeting there to obviously try to give a boost to this. Listen to what he says he can do about diagnosing children himself.
I'm looking at kids as I walk through the airports today, as I walk down the street, and I see these kids that are just overburdened with mitochondrial challenges, with inflammation. You can tell from their faces, from their body movements. I know that that's not how our children are supposed to look.
He can tell from their faces, from their body movements, he says. Very few doctors consider that any kind of diagnostic, but this is the state we're in. This is the leadership team that Donald Trump has selected. And this is, even as I mentioned, a late summer period where people may not catch every little bit of news, but the news they are keeping up with, whether they get it through traditional media sources or an alert on their phones or even social media, which we've cautioned sometimes has a lot of false information, but whatever general picture people are getting, it is leading to this historically low approval for the president, a disapproval on policy, on substance, and clearly, as the No Kings protests also showed, a concern about whether Gavin Newsom and others are right, whether we are living through the slow building boil of a plan to end democracy in this country. And for all the hyperbolic exchanges, which do happen, by the way, from politicians sometimes in both corners, Donald Trump has basically spent the bulk of this first year of the term proving his critics right, showing that the autocratic warnings were not overstatement. Many of the things he's doing now sound like Democratic campaign ads from last year. He'll put Marines in the streets. He'll put troops in the streets. He'll undercut science. He'll put conspiracy theorists in charge of your children's health. We've now seen Wall Street leaders who may have said, oh, fine, push back on DEI or BLM. Oh, fine, okay, he wants to have a little more say about things. And now this week they're seeing he wants to go after central banking. He wants to control the economy in what some call a warped view of MAGA socialism. Other people call it extortion. What were you saying today, and do you think anyone on Wall Street is waking up?
I think that we are saying exactly that, and that is that when it was DEI and just diversity, which implies minorities and women, Wall Street looked the other way. When they now see that he's taken 10% in Intel, I mean, this is supposed to be the conservatives that don't believe in government interference. He's going in dealing with taking over policing in Washington, threatening to do it in Chicago and other places. What happened to the states' rights philosophy of the conservatives where national government doesn't come in? So they're beginning to see a different threat to themselves. And that's why the march today was important. Thousands of people, more than I thought would come, march down, because not only are we not getting the jobs or eliminating jobs, they're eliminating business contracts to blacks and women and Latinos. They're eliminating C-suites. And the people on Wall Street needed to see bodies in their lunch hour like that that'll say, we will buy a few shares of stock, come to your stockholders' meetings with thousands of people. We're going to have this argument. And I think Donald Trump, having known and fought with him and was friendly with him and fought with him again for the last 40 years, he only respects people that will stand up to him. He does not respect people that are cows to him.
Yeah, and we're seeing that sort of diversion in the country. A lot of people are standing up. There's a lot of opposition. I showed the polling. Governor Newsom says you got to take him seriously and fight it now. It's too late if you expect people to catch up with it later. And he's pointing to both Trump musing about a third term, musing about being a dictator, Steve Bannon, who's on the outs, who's not running things the way he used to, but it often is the kind of trial balloon for these things. Take a listen to Bannon.
The lead story over at Semaphore, wait for it, Republican voters now 53-47 support President Trump running for a third term. I kid you not. Told you this day was coming.
Do you think Trump is serious about this and Newsom is right to say you got to get this out there and fight it now?
I think that he is serious as he is about anything else, but he becomes increasingly serious when there's no pushback and when people like Bannon, whether he's inside or outside the tent, make stuff popular. Trump is a person that goes with whatever serves his ego and purposes at the time. He's not a deep thinker. He doesn't think in 2025 about 28. But if it sounds right and he can build up and gear up a momentum, yes, he will do it. And look at what he's doing. He has, to be taking over cities, to say you want to remove a governor from the Federal Reserve on an accusation. We don't know that there's going to be an indictment. We don't know there's going to be a prosecution. We don't know if there's going to be a conviction. He wants to fire her based on an accusation. And here's a man with 34 felony convictions and was found guilty of fraud with how he did business. And no one's hitting back saying, wait a minute, you're the last person that ought to be talking about an accusation. You're a convict, the only one that ever sat in the Oval Office.